Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of What's New in Data. We have an awesome guest today. A lot of people told me I had to talk to him specifically about this topic of text to SQL. Ethan Ding, co-founder and CEO of TextQL. Ethan, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely, absolutely. We last crossed paths at a Snowflake Summit. We were able to catch up there. Always love hearing your perspectives on the things that are going on right now in the market, especially with respect to AI and how it's converging with data and analytics. But first, tell the listeners a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I graduated from Berkeley a while ago, and right out of college, I started working at a VC. It's called Bessemer. They introduced me to one of their portfolio companies. I started running their 10-person data team there, and then uh, the and then I guess I just entrepreneurship bug bit me, or I think that's the thing you're supposed to say. And I started working on this 35-year unsolved text to SQL problem. And so in the past two-ish years, that's what we've been working on. We're about 10 people. And we raised $4 million. We work with places like the NBA and Anheuser-Busch. But technically, that's the thing you're supposed to say to the very, to, to the press. Something a little bit closer to the truth is that I entered at a VC, worked at a startup, and then was probably a little bit too hyperactive and aggressive, and had all the hubris of a 22-year-old who doesn't understand that people have been working on data problems for the past 50 years. After I got fired from that job, after a year and a half, when I was 30 days from being deported, I just met a guy on the internet who turned out to be my co-founder, and we exchanged 10 messages for all right, let's just see what we can solve together. We knew that we didn't have the connections to get a bunch of companies to become our customers right away. So we're okay, the only thing we have going for us is that we're fairly young. So we have 12-hour days, no kids to look after, dedicate to the craft. And so we're let's just pick the hardest possible problem in the data space that everyone's kind of tried to fail and solve. And there's a 3%, 5% chance that we can solve it. The expected value on that might actually be pretty high. But yeah, that's the action.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you for being direct. A lot of people do respect your opinion here. And I think it is directly related to the fact that you're so obsessed with solving this problem, really end to end in a way that's actually resilient and scalable. And that's this problem of text to SQL. And of course, this is all tied to the fact that AI is becoming very popular, generative AI specifically. Just today on the day that this podcast is being recorded on September 12th, all the AI leaders in the US are at the White House briefing the president and the executive staff on what we're actually going to do as a country with respect to what are our needs and what are our goals to actually make sure we're the leader in AI. Now, bringing this back down to this discussion, which is, okay, text to SQL. Maybe quickly, if you could define text to SQL and the value of it for the listeners.
Yeah. At the most naive level, it's this idea that it rhymes with just users not having to write code. This idea that everyone's now a software engineer. If you spend any time on Twitter or LinkedIn, you might have seen a ton of people posting about that. And it's that you shouldn't have to know how to write code. You should just be able to ask the sentence. How many customers of ours from the Midwest region engaged with one of our pieces of marketing? And they give me the list of all those customers, and then let me do a bunch of stuff with it. Right? SQL is probably the most similar to natural language in terms of the coding languages. And so I think a lot of people felt like this was going to be a really easy problem to solve with large language models coming up. I think it was the second most common company idea in the YC application batch for three batches in a row right after ChatGPT came out. And yeah, seems to be very much, it was a friend of mine for a couple of years, but it has a super long history, 35 years of code. I think SAP Business Objects was the first company that tried to say, oh, your business operators won't have to learn SQL. They can just type things. And at its simplest, it could just be typing sentences like get me top 7 like assets by week, by month, by state. And basically you're just teaching someone to write slightly more compressed SQL in English, something that looks like English. And at the ultimate end state, right, the dream for text to SQL or for like true self-service analytics is you don't have to do 1,000 hours of cleaning. You don't have to do 1,000 hours of documenting. You don't have to like teach someone exactly what kind of syntax is. They should be able to say something meaningfully like nebulous, like how we make more money. And that should return like a intelligible result. It won't be an algorithm for you to make more money reliably, but it should be able to explore your data for you. It should be able to answer questions for you. And along the way, it'll generate a lot of SQL to explore that data for you.
Absolutely. And this all comes back to this very like fundamental question. Okay, we have ChatGPT now. Can we have ChatGPT basically for our internal data? Can someone from marketing or sales just go log in and say, hey, show me my top 10 customers right now so that I can put them into this email campaign for loyalty that we're doing, or just make all this data very accessible and simple. Is it actually possible with the technology we have now for teams to actually build like a chat GPT style interface for their internal data?
Yeah. I think everyone's in the past 2 years has noticed that despite all the companies that all the enterprises that have said we're going to bring you like ChatGPT for your specific data within their system, they don't feel that every day. You're still submitting Jira tickets to your data team that takes 2 weeks to 2 months to turn around. But you're still like, yeah, if you're on the data team, you're still getting people like tapping you on the shoulder and going, hey, please, can you pull me this report that I asked you for last week, like 7 times over again? And it's that I think most companies today I've seen them get trapped in this like local optimal called like, I would call it like next token prediction based text to SQL. And it looks like you type in a sentence, you just ask the language model, here's the schema. Can you generate like the next tokens? Maybe you do some fine tuning on the side of the large like cloud providers. They have a very high incentive to tell your data leaders to like keep just putting more money and more money into like fine tuning it, which really just means like tuning it to your hard coded schema. Because as we all know, our data schema has definitely never changed on a regular basis. And then because you can always say that it is like a black box, and so it'll nebulously approach something that's good enough to accurate. It siphons up a lot of energy. And the spider benchmark for text to SQL is something that I think a lot of people like try to use as like a benchmark for performance. And the reality is, it seems like we've built. We knew we didn't know very much going in. We rebuilt the platform like 9 times over at this point, and I think we gave up on that style of like black box next token language model generation based like text to SQL a long time ago. I think we have a path forward to like really good text to SQL like across the board for most use cases that we can conceive of. ChatGPT for your data is definitely not just a pipe dream, but it's something that is well on a way. Um, you know, to just forecast how long for us to get like personal computers out of the early computing paradigms. Language models very much feels like a new class of computing. And I would expect it to take maybe like 2-ish more years before we get where we feel every single day that like all the questions that we want to ask are they're just at our fingertips. We're able to get this number, we're able to get this list of customers, we're able to get this like set of criteria or forecast this like direction or forecast this metric forward like 3 months with some confidence intervals. Yes, but we've been
Yeah,
stuck in somewhat of a local minimum for about 2 years now.
absolutely. And you mentioned Spider, which was a benchmark that a team from Yale ran on Texas SQL. And they mainly focus on trying to make it real by having a very complex cross domain data set. And it seems like nothing is really like performing at the level where it's actually bulletproof and always going to give you the right response. So it's not there yet, is what you're saying, but we're getting close. So with that being said, what is the right way to do it if you're a data team? tasked with delivering something like this?
Yeah. When we first started, we like Spider was like our everyday, like we used every day, like we like dug into the research papers and like methodologies of the past. I think we actually spent a lot of time with the guys over at ServiceNow who wrote the paper before language models and transformers of a different class of model for doing who like nailed up to 85% was the leading accuracy. And what he established with us was like the problem with text-to-SQL was never like natural language like interpretation. It was that about the last 20% of those questions are so ambiguously phrased that there's no reasonable way to conclude that this answer that they have like in this benchmark is like the correct answer when there are like three or four other potential answers that are equally valid. And so at the end of the day, if you're hitting over like 85 to 90% accuracy on that benchmark, you're probably just hard coding it to that, but like you've probably overtuned the test set. And what that takes us to, it takes us to the fact that like self-driving cars have 5 years ago, everybody thought autonomous driving was going to be a very competitive field. There were so many companies raising like multiple billions of dollars to go after it. And today, like Waymo is alive, kept alive by Waymo is working and getting very close, but still not quite there, only in a few cities. It's because the long tail of these human error or human interpretation or schema error type things are basically impossible for us to get 100% out of a black box. And yet, if we look at places like Tokyo or Shanghai, there are already very large pieces of transportation infrastructure that are autonomously driven. They're cars, they have wheels, but they don't drive on roads, they drive on train tracks. And it's because they built systems around not human drivers, but around like getting people from point A to point B. And that's, I think, the lens that we should take for like language models and doing text to SQL, which is that the goal is not to generate SQL like willy nilly, like on anything in like a way that we're not like worried about. The goal is to get insights. The goal is to get your users to be able to ask a question and get the answers they want right away. And that is like, for the most part, like you have history, you have footprints that you've left. Your analysts, every time they write a query, every time they run that against the warehouse, every time they get a data set back because somebody asked the question, that's a footprint that they're leaving behind. That is an indicator that like these join paths are the kind of join paths that need to be run. And from there, you can also compress the problem of like text to SQL down to a series of checkboxes. And language models are much more, I would trust them much more to like transparently like tick a series of checkboxes, define a series of attributes to answer the question than to figure out every possible join that you're brute forcing with like fuzzy matches or all of the data munching that I think anyone who's worked in data is like super familiar with.
Yeah. And that's a great description of where we are now and the ways you have to abstract it to be successful in the future, which is essentially, yeah, you're building roads for your agents to navigate between your internal data sets, your core data models that are surface of the business. You don't want to go into too much raw or uncurated data, something that could be, it happens all the time, like where data teams are ELTing all their internal data into the warehouse. A lot of field might be something from Salesforce that the sales team even use anymore. It's a deprecated field, but no one tagging is deprecated. So your LLM, it very well could be like a source of
Yeah.
truth. And so there are all these challenges that have to be solved with good internal data quality and good internal practices for data modeling as well, which again creates more overhead, comes back to your problem out. Yeah, I need a report. I still need someone to go in and spend 2 weeks to actually pull the right data because they're actually going to do this nasty stuff that I mentioned, which means like going and asking the data producer, is this field still accurate or is it deprecated, and doing all this other stuff like pulling in third party data sets, et cetera. Right. So none of that stuff is exactly solved here. Now that will get solved, right? Data teams are continuously getting better thanks to all the technology coming into the market that accelerates things. But coming back to the last question, which is what's the right way for data teams to actually deliver something that's like chat GPT for their data? maybe we'll step back and say, okay, should we even care? Why not just keep the status quo with current business intelligence tools?
Yeah, that's fair. It is a it's one of those pains where you just get used to it. For like this is you you were able to your business was fine last year. It was fine the year before necessarily because if it was not fine, you wouldn't be around anymore. Therefore, you probably had a good amount of time where you have gone without with having to just like brute force your SQL and brute force your like your questions and waiting like 2 weeks to 2 months just doesn't take that long. And it makes it and like at the end of the day, your BI tools, like most of the questions that you're asking are going through the same paths. The I think actually something really quickly to touch on something you said about the fact that all these problems are going to get solved. It actually feels like right now, if I gave you like $1 billion and an army of 1,000 engineers, and I told you like for a large enterprise like Goldman Sachs or Capital One, like clean and organize and catalog their S3, that might actually be an intractable problem because even with 1,000 people, just the communication band, there's a maximum amount of throughput of work you could do. And at the end of the day, there's so much stuff getting dumped in there that this idea, there's more data being produced than we can catalog. And I think anyone who's used any of the AI generated like data descriptions and stuff in the past year has found out that language models without the context of where the data came from, and not all data comes in the context of where it came from, can't really be trusted to catalog that data. And that problem actually looks a lot like it actually looks a lot more like Google Maps, where, if Google Maps relied on every single like some like data governance committee to manually update like the like open and close time of every single restaurant on the planet and update it as the restaurant closed, or all these things, they would have a really, really hard time. And the way Google Maps stays up is they make that a capability of updating that system of record a stochastic system where you have a bunch of users, they like note when something is wrong and vote with their actions, vote with their decisions to actually like, go to a restaurant. You can see them like physically go to the restaurant from their geolocation. In the same way, we have those footprints that your analysts are leaving across your org, where if somebody goes back to a data set over and over and over and over, even if they didn't clear this with the data governance committee, even if the data set is in like Google Sheets or something, because we've all seen that pain. That's probably an important data set. It's probably a genuinely like, valuable source of truth. And whether or not it's been stamped source of truth doesn't matter if like your entire customer success team uses this as like the canonical like data catalog. And so as you build out, as other solutions are built out that are able to get your users numbers faster, you can see something that's similar that takes place with hedge funds, or if you actually look at the airline industry, how they first adopted like dynamic pricing. I think it was either American Airlines or United that first discovered that if you could get numbers faster and like you're able to drive analytics faster to drive up the price of a seat between Texas and between Austin and like New York, that like it helps you like capture some amount of value. And for about like 18 months after the first airline adopted it, that airline just dominated every single quarter. Their bookings were higher, their revenues were higher, their profit margins were higher because they were like crowding they could just make decisions faster. They could make data driven decisions 10 to 100 times faster than every other airline on the market. But they didn't have to pay a margin to the human operators that had to stand there in the way. And then because of that first one, which only came about because I think the CEO was like sitting on a plane in first class with the IBM CEO by accident, every other airline had to keep up and they had to build out their own system. The dynamic pricing had to keep up. And so in this world, like you don't have to be like right now, like those airlines are fine, but those like 18 months where the first early adopters were able to move and they were able to dominate the market share for a very short period of time with an overwhelming advantage. That's what data driven is supposed to mean. That's what it's supposed to mean when you can move faster with more confidence, with more numbers, with 10 to 100 times more numbers at 10 to 100 times the speed. And so existing BI tools are great for visualizing things that are critical on an everyday basis, but your analytics is a commodity. And if you're Nike competing with Adidas, if you're Kroger competing with like another grocery chain, if you're Walmart competing with Target, your ability to win is a function of how much more quickly can you get information about your business than your competitors. And if you both have the same BI tools, which for the most part, I guess companies that large tend to have every BI tool.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of competitive pressure for you to need to like do something about it. But
So you're
if you
you're
want it to
saying
use,
that
yeah,
they're all using, again, this this original question was like, okay, why not just keep the status quo with the current business intelligence tools that are popular in the market? Your point is that analytics is an arms race of getting numbers faster and better than the competition, essentially uncovering alpha. And that means that you need to have this kind of more creative thinking and not be limited by the status quo typical tooling that's in the market. You need to think about how you as a enterprise can innovate and beat your own competition. And I think this does come back to the value of accelerating analytics by making the data more accessible to the operational teams that are actually going to directly tied to the business. Okay, for an airline, yeah, we have this super smart pricing, seat pricing system. If we're a retailer, we have dynamic pricing, surge pricing, et cetera. And then, of course, making customer experiences better and more streamlined can always add additional value. If those retail experiences are contextual, right? Like you walk into your favorite retail store and they're like, oh, last time you were here, you were shopping for a shirt, but you didn't buy one. Here, where you put out all the shirts that you wanted to
yeah,
could potentially own, so you don't have to, linger around and wait for someone to come talk to you and get lost in the store or whatnot. So there's all these places for data to quickly add value. So now we're talking about thinking outside the box and doing innovative things with data. Well, first I want to ask you this. So you're CEO of TextQL. You recently just raised 4.1 million in a seed round, and many people are talking about what you're doing and consider you a thought leader on this particular topic of text-to-SQL. So I want to ask you, what does TextQL do?
yeah. We help you get numbers fast. That's the tagline. I was trying to think of something clever related to high frequency trading, but ultimately, like your business people, companies do better when your business operators know more information. And if you know more information than your competition, then you do like even better still. If you Toyota early like assembly lines, like the operators knew like the failure rate of every single component on the field. And that's why they were able to outclass American manufacturers like for those early days. But high frequency trading firms, they can get like the price of a stock faster at like with higher precision than at like other like traditional banks. That's why they were able to eke out an edge. And and for us, we plug into like your business users, they don't care about the difference between a spreadsheet and a database and a data warehouse and a BI tool. They just know that you have some set of data assets across your organization and it's stored in some place and nebulously called like the cloud or the databases that you have. And we plug into all of that. We're building an agent that can read from your BI tool, from your Tableau to your Power BI, to your Databricks, to your Snowflake, across multiple clouds and pull that data into one place so that you can ask any question from what are which plants that are manufacturing cans of Coca-Cola have the highest volatility to like temperature because you see a cold front coming up to having which like show me all the fans of the Warriors that tuned in to the first 30 minutes of the game, but then tuned out afterward. And then like, so that I can send a marketing campaign, get me their emails, give me their favorite player and favorite team. So I can send like a 15-second clips from the second half of the game that they didn't watch to their emails so I can activate them better. And so like we're trying to build the magic box, the magic autopilot for getting analytics and trying to drive data-driven decisions at a higher frequency for most of our customers.
Yeah, absolutely powerful stuff. And what were some of the core technical decisions you made in your product to enable this type of power? Because the way you describe it is business users don't have to be aware of these technical details, whether it's in a warehouse or a spreadsheet or what have you. So you've clearly abstracted that in some way. You don't have to reveal like your secret sauce, but maybe at a high level, you can talk about some of the cool stuff you've built to enable this.
Yeah. I don't actually believe in secret sauces. I feel like you should put all of your plans on the table because if you're like really good, you're going to build something valuable. People should come to you. And that's ultimately like how you get your advantage. We do, we build something called an ontology. You can think of it almost like a map of like a Google Maps for all of your assets. It sees like the times that you've gotten a ticket in Jira, it takes you in a Snowflake, you write a certain kind of query that references these backing tables with these join paths, and then eventually pushes into Tableau, and it ties all of that together so that the next time like a user asks a question to our agent, they're not generating the SQL. They are traversing the paths you've already taken through your data, because knowing that you as a human have gone through that before, that's probably a more reliable path. And the more your people use it, the more paths, like the more footprints they leave, the more the canonical objects that are like that represent your contracts, your entities, your conversions, your payments, your bills, your logs, they become crystallized. And then using that, we traverse this graph and we are able to get you numbers back.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And I think this is where a lot of data teams struggle is like even the concept of an ontology on top of your internal data can be quite an effort to build out. And data teams also ultimately they don't want to be in a position where, every time they get a request feels ad hoc, out of left field, and they have to do a bunch of work, which is blocking infrastructure work to go serve it. If that thing is just an out of the box insight that a business user can go access themselves, that's amazing, right? Even the way I look at organizing our data internally is that we have to do extra work to make it easy for business users to use, right? We have to do a lot of ETL and modeling on the data and then think about how we're going to sync it to HubSpot or Salesforce as like a really easily readable field. But that's work, right? That's always engineering effort. I would never tell our sales team, oh, go have fun with our data warehouse and figure out like what we should go after, right? Because it would never work. So I do really see the value here to data teams because data teams ultimately, their job is to just maintain the data state and the infrastructure and then making it easy for both business and technical users to get insights from that data and operationalize it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that a system, there's some old idiom, and it's that the purpose of a system is what it does and not what it claims to do. And if you have like a ticket queue that somebody can submit, or if you have like a field and like Snowflake that you've like finally brought in, or somebody asks a question about it and you say, oh, random salesperson, could you like learn SQL and figure it out yourself? And in doing that, the claim is that you're helping them like find the data because you've already done the work to bring it in. But if the result is that they don't go learn it, and I think we all know that they're not going to go learn it, the purpose of that action is effectively to prevent them from like, answering the question. And I think there's a lot of people are going to behave a certain way. They're going to go through a certain set of tools. You have to bring the data much closer to them for them to feel comfortable. And the longer it takes, the less will be brought. It's a necessary trade-off that everyone has to acknowledge. And so if we can make it a lot faster, then hopefully there's a lot more data that's available for everybody.
Absolutely. And yeah, the reality is that people focus on what they're good at, right? Salespeople have to go out and sell, marketers have to do marketing. And SQL isn't a skill that everyone has. And even if you do know SQL, learning your company's internal data state is additional overhead, right? And the best possible scenario, if we were just make this really simple, a seller just going in and asking whatever the internal data system is, hey, give me the top leads for me to go after. I don't have to do select from this table, do a join across my product databases and my marketing databases and my third party lead scoring systems. And you don't have to think about that, right? So I think this is the path for a future where that is possible. People can just chat with their data and get the response that they need that's relevant to their operations.
I think we're close. First, it's going to be, we need to build out the systems that let relatively clean data to be analyzed very well. And then we need to build the systems that brings basically all of your data that's not super clean into a place where it is like clean. And that has to come from both sides. I'm super excited to see what everyone is working through. But yeah,
Yeah,
more data
absolutely.
faster.
Yeah. And in a lot of these, in most of these situations, you assume that most companies have some table stakes data infrastructure. They have maybe a lake or a database, and then some ETL. And of course, a cloud provider. So, what's the core infrastructure that you prioritize to build on top of?
So for us, we connect to BI tools and data warehouses as a priority. And then we have built our ontology to be like any semantic layer can build into it. And so this way we have a kind of it is meant to be like the widest possible, like we almost treat each tool as like a location for us to go to for our agent to be able to traverse. And a car would be a pretty crappy car if it could only go through 2 blocks. It should be able to get you to every single block. And so it's one place for you to ask those questions. And so we have Snowflake, Redshift, Databricks, BigQuery, all the standard warehouses like Tableau, Power BI, Sigma, and uh, probably going to build out something for Looker like fairly soon. And so at the end of the day, if you like zoom out really far, like every single SQL query in Snowflake really is just a table, and every single table in Snowflake is just a table. Every single model and DBT is a table, and every single metric with a couple dimensions in a semantic layer is a table, and every single dashboard is backed by a table. And so there's a really cool way that you can unify all of these things into a standardized format and just search through all of them, because it just it you have tables all over the place, and your business people just they're not going to know the difference, and you need to be able to ask questions across all of it.
Yeah, and it's great that the way this solution is positioned, TextQL specifically, assumes I have BI in place, assumes I have a data warehouse in place. So you're not going in and replacing one or telling its team, okay, you have to rip and replace your semantic layer. You have to rip and replace BI and use our cool thing. Right. So I think that makes it almost more practical in a way, even though it has a very grand vision for how it can speed up productivity for your data teams. It's not, it's almost evolutionary, not like revolutionary in the way that it's building on top of what you have rather than telling you have to replace a bunch of what you have, which I think
Yeah.
makes it more practical and adoptable for data teams.
Yeah. I think when we first started, there's strangely there was a narrative that I super bought into at the time, which is that Snowflake's going to be the place where you store all of your data, and you're going to move all of your data out of IBM DB2 and SAP and all these places, and operate on it in Snowflake. And I didn't understand why all the people older than me at the time was like, "Uh, this is never going to happen. This is like a pipe dream marketing scheme." And zooming out, it does seem like new technology is only ever like data doesn't move out of old systems. And even if they try to, it usually takes 10 times longer than people expect. And if you go to r/data engineering, the top 3 posts, top 3 of 5 posts at any given day is always about a horrible migration gone wrong. And so it seems like it is like a smart decision to leave your data in the places that it currently already is able to do stuff with. But that means that if you're going to have a true self-service system, it can't depend on migrations and it can't depend on moving. And because there's always that one person who is still stuck in this old BI tool, if you can't move everyone across and that person has enough gravity, you're never going to get out of Power BI. You're never going to get out of Tableau. And that's okay because you have these assets exist and they're important and people are used to using them and you shouldn't pull them out. Something that is going to help you move forward has to be something that has to bring you from where you are to there instead of just stand here and say like, all right, now you take on team and users and everyone take on the risk of bringing yourself from that system to ours. And that feels, and that's very much like a philosophy that we've adopted from day one, mostly because we really didn't want to build some shelfware.
Yeah. And that's, that is a thoughtful way of looking at it where, yes, the current BI tools, the current database, data lake, what have you, has a certain amount of gravity, meaning it's already operational. There's already data flowing through it. There's already probably internal docs on how to use it. And what you're really doing is like augmenting that, which totally makes sense. Absolutely powerful to start thinking about how we can better enable the operational teams actually use data without being exposed to the complexity of the underlying data infrastructure. So
Yeah.
Ethan Ding, co-founder and CEO of TextQL. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was super insightful and exciting to hear about your product. Where can people follow along with your work?
We're TextQL on, I think, LinkedIn and Twitter. And I think I actually probably post more than the company account because I feel like nobody actually wants to read posts from a company account. So I'm the Ethan Ding on both LinkedIn and Twitter, and textql.com is the
Yeah,
URL.
that's great. Yeah. So textql.com.
Yep.
Ethan's very active on LinkedIn. We'll have links out to all those in the show notes below if you look to the description. Ethan, thanks again for joining us, and thank you to the audience for tuning in.
Thanks, John, for having me. Have a good one.